Last week on July 20th, I did an interview on my friend Jen's channel, The Atheist Wind Down. We discussed several topics at length, from healthcare rights to memories, but one towered over the rest: allyship, respect, and why they must be synonymous. I'm here to talk with potential allies about how much more we share than not, so even if you're not a big fan of me and my work, I ask that you listen with an open mind. You might be surprised by what you hear. Kairete! Before we get started, I've got some new fan art from Discord that I'd love to share with you all. Celery of Celery's Garden submitted this little gem of me sitting with a stack of books as big as my face. Adorable. And from House of Chimeras, we have a picture of me and a bunch of my friends together promoting allyship. From left to right is Wolf the Red, Ocean the Bar, Callan, myself, Jen, and Cirrus. We are indeed stronger together. Thank you for your submissions. This topic is the central focus of my Xenia Bridge weekly live show, in which Jen and I invite folks from all over the YouTube community to talk about allyship. Atheists, polytheists, Buddhists, even some heretical Christians, all who see a common bond in fighting unjust legislation, social attitudes, and other problems that tend to stem from fundamentalist Abrahamic faiths. All of us share a common cause, but as I'd like to explore in this video, I think there's more to it than that. Before we get started though, we need to define some terms. I've noticed some opposition in the live chat on Xenia Bridge to my use of the term anti-theism and how it's synonymous in many minds with atheism. Though my friend Jen did an excellent definitional vid on the topic, link in the iCard when she gets it done, I'd still like to go over it here for those who haven't seen her or Ocean's take on the issue. Ocean's video on superstition is also linked in the iCard. The way I see it, there are three atheist camps when it comes to religion. The first we don't really hear from as much, which are folks who don't believe in any gods and move on with their lives. They don't tend to see their atheism as a central part of their identity. The second, anti-theists, are folks who see religion itself as intrinsically harmful and want to see it eradicated from the earth. These people often use abusive and derogatory tactics to combat religious ideas, even those they don't understand. We'll get into these tactics and the reasoning behind them later. The third camp is anti-harm or anti-superstition. They're folks who place worship and religion on a spectrum and only oppose those beliefs and practices which directly harm the worshiper and those around them. They're not usually too concerned with religions that don't proselytize, that are kept personal and don't oppose science, or those religions that don't try to legislate morality. They don't usually see belief itself as harmful, only when that belief translates into cultural actions and practices which cause harm, such as shame for sexuality, suppression of feminine or minority rights, direct physical harm such as bloodletting or snake handling, and etc. This video is primarily focusing on the second camp, the anti-theists. That's who I'm hoping to talk to today. Many of those I've met have been deeply hurt by concepts like hell belief that threaten the non-believer with horrific torment for all eternity if they don't stick to the religion they were born into. I plan on doing a video on hell belief and Stockholm Syndrome sometime soon, by the way. Evangelical Christianity, especially the fundamentalist varieties, has a tendency to put believers in a terrible bind where their entire communities are not only defined by faith, but those who leave it can lose near all their friends and family for coming out as no longer believing. When you combine that with many of these evangelical faiths denying personal experience with deity in favor of an intellectual focus on the Bible, gaslighting of believers who have doubts by redirecting blame for seeming contradictions on the believer's misunderstanding or misinterpretation, and the regressive tendencies toward LGBTQ folks and folks assigned female at birth, and you have the perfect recipe for severe trauma. I would know. I came out of a faith much like that and lost several of my family members who will not speak to me because I don't worship their God. I feel that pain. Coming out of any kind of trauma creates a cocktail of emotions. There's sadness and regret, but also a firestorm of anger. Anger at yourself for believing the lies you were told for many years just because of who told them to you, anger at those who lied to you, anger at the church as an institution, anger at those who uphold them, and for many, anger at the very concept of religion. I understand that anger. Many of us have suffered abuse and trauma at the hands of fundamentalists and evangelicals. The angry pagan phase is a thing we tend to go through alongside atheists. Many pagans first come into our paths after a bout of atheism or agnosticism, or are introduced through Wicca. Many young Wiccans are afraid to approach any male gods because of lingering pain from the patriarchal religions they came out of. Dianic Wicca in particular, riddled with turfs as it might be, is very much a response to that pain, a vicious swing to the divine feminine and rejection of the masculine to strike back at those who hurt them. We often feel the need to trash Christianity, and sometimes even our own who acknowledge the Christian God is real, even if they don't think he's the only one or that most of the Bible has any basis in reality. We build this victimization into our very identities, lashing out at anyone who so much as hints at advocating a return to that horrible, helpless state. I'm not advocating for God belief here, mind you, just drawing a parallel. The problem with striking out against religion as a unified, quote-unquote, concept, however, is that you risk missing the nuances inherent in other faiths. By rejecting all based on the dominant hegemony, you create an issue where differences end up denied and oversimplification rules the day. It's the same principle as people who end up in a messy divorce and take on the misogynistic belief that all women are whores who just want to run off with their money, or all men are cheaters who just want to get some and take off. Although the pain from their experience is valid from their perspective, the conclusions they reach are not. For example, without divine command theory, which is loosely defined as believing morality and laws come directly from the gods and are unchallengeable, you have significantly less of a motivation to legislate morality on the rest of society. Without the insistence that only one set of gods and beliefs regarding them are valid, as found in Christianity, you're not motivated to convert others or force your beliefs onto them. And without the concept of a divinely infallible text that is supposed to govern all of humanity, there is less ground for science denial or the insistence of discriminatory behavior. Though all of these things can still happen, the powerful impetus put on the believer by all of them in Christianity is gone. By lumping all of religion into the category of inherently harmful, you are ignoring these important distinctions between faiths and limiting yourself on those who you'll be able to interact with in a respectful manner. Besides, anti-theism itself is founded on shaky ground. The insistence that beliefs, even those originating from personal experience, automatically cause harm due to a perceived increased risk of falling for woo is dressing up the slippery slope fallacy. Many folks in STEM fields, including a close friend of mine who's a climate scientist, have God belief and yet don't advocate for any or all of the terrible things I talked about earlier. I've met Episcopalians who don't even deny that my gods exist, they just worship theirs, and they're supposed to be Christians. There are also atheists I've met who believe in bizarre conspiracy theories or are against LGBT rights because of biological determinism or bunk science. The answer to a single question doesn't immunize you from bad ideas or automatically predispose you to adopting them. To claim otherwise and subject people to ableist slurs like calling religious beliefs delusional and comparing gods to imaginary dragons in one's garage or hallucinations of Elvis is ultimately a form of science denialism. The DSM-5 itself puts a caveat in the description of delusions for religious belief. It's clear that although some religious experiences may be tied to mental illness, it isn't fair to say they all are. Unless you can prove that all of religious belief is automatically causing distress and interfering with people's lives, you can't call all of religious belief a clinical delusion. Especially given that using delusional or irrational as an insult further stigmatizes people who have mental illnesses with psychotic episodes or delusions as symptoms. You're basically stating that in your belief, these people can't understand their own reality because that's the claim you're making about theists. It also ignores the detailed systems of verification used within polytheist faiths when it comes to personal experience. I'll drop a link in the iCard to Ocean's video on the topic above. Suffice to say, most of us have thought through our faiths in detail and still support science. In fact, let's take a closer look at the idea that personal experience isn't a reliable path to truth. Do you believe that an objective reality exists? Do you think you can experience it directly? Are you sure? Because if you think you've ever touched, smelled, or tasted anything, you are technically wrong. What happened is that electrochemical pathways transmitted information to your brain, which was interpreted as the experience of smell, taste, touch, sight, etc., but any interruption in those pathways, or any part of reality we can't experience through them, is locked away to us. We're limited by our senses and the instruments we construct in what parts of reality we can experience, and even then, we have to trust that the version of reality constructed by said senses must be reasonably accurate. If we don't, we just end up in a position where we're just a brain in a vat or a program on a computer somehow contemplating a false existence. What you're implying is that if it's possible to hallucinate touch, taste, smell, etc., then all of these things thereby must be hallucinations. Would you stick your hand on a burner just to prove the pain isn't real? If the answer is no, you must trust personal experience to some degree. And if you say it's the interpretation you have an issue with, then great! Pagans tend to argue with each other about the interpretation of our personal experiences all the time. We don't tend to deny that they're divine in origin, but we do tend to argue about what they mean. By attempting to reclassify all of divine experience as undiagnosed or diagnosed mental illness, you're creating a situation where it's not possible to treat those with God belief as equal to yourself in terms of cognition. You must be right and they must be wrong. But pagans don't see you that way. Given that we ground our beliefs in personal experience rather than some divine holy text, we see your non-belief as equally valid. We're using a similar epistemological framework, and if you're frustrated by all the nuance and detail in the aforementioned questions and examples, welcome to the hell of epistemology. It's hard to know anything about anything. There are also nasty tactics and scripts related to street epistemology, but that's a topic for a different video. Let me know in the comments if you want to hear my thoughts on it, but I can sum them up as the Socratic method is both more thorough and more good faith. Beyond this, it can hardly be called critical thinking to recite scripts without listening to the answers to your questions. Critical thinking itself entails willingness to engage with ideas without the assumption that you already have the answers. I have a personal saying that fits well here. I'd rather be educated than right. In other words, even when discussing things with folks you disagree with, don't automatically assume you know what they're going to say. Be open to the experience of new information and new perspectives. By taking the time to understand those you disagree with, you can deepen your understanding of your own perspective. When you lump all of religions into a single straw man based on a single faith you've experienced in your life, you rob yourself of the opportunity to learn. Insult and criticism are not the same thing, and critical thinking is not synonymous with regurgitating the same rhetoric about irrationality of a crod-omni-god that you would when talking to most Christians and expecting to own a pagan. Respect in discourse is essential. Respect itself is essential for allyship. You can't work with someone who sees you as less, and by labeling us irrational without more than a cursory glance at our ideas and beliefs, mentally ill because experiences that can't be reclassified as such without a medical degree, and engaging with the sole purpose of one-upsmanship and deconversion, puts you in the same position as Christians attempting to reconvert us. You left the faith behind. Why carry the baggage of perpetual correctness and evangelical drive with you? We want to fight woo as much as you do. We've suffered as you have. We've been angry like you are. We accept you for who you are and what you do and don't believe. We're welcome to discussion and challenges to our ideas, but only within a respectful framework where we're treated as equal participants in the conversation. Many pagans see atheists as potential allies, but the abusive tactics anti-theists use to try to sway us from our beliefs rather than accepting us for who we are ultimately burns bridges before they could ever be built. And why should you burn the bridge with a potential ally over the answer to a single question? It seems silly to me. Thanks for sticking with me through that. I know we talk a lot about it on Xenia Bridge, but not all of you have seen my live show, and this is a message I felt was key to what the work here on the channel is all about. If you're new here and appreciated anything you've heard, yell at the subscribe button and evangelize the bell until it gives you notifications in a proper, rational manner. Drop down into the comments and make it clear that not all atheists are like that, or let me know if you appreciated anything you heard. Link in the description to my Patreon if you want to help support my content. For my heavier educational videos, it helps a ton with expensive research material. Plus, if you're $10 or up, you get to be in a monthly drawing for a bonus video where we find a topic together that you really want me to cover. This month, Theophilos wanted me to do a deep dive on how the ancient Greeks saw high days. I only charge for 4 videos a month, so the Patreon topic is a bonus, and they get it for an entire week before I release it onto my channel. Special thanks to GaelicNox for all their awesome channel art, link is always in the description, and extra special thanks to my patrons. You make this all possible for me week in and week out. And remember, we're stronger together.